I think it says a lot about your organization, Joyce and Ellen, that you would invite two academics to speak to you and give them 20 minutes to speak. Mike and I both have PhDs, and he beats me as a JD, but we don't think in 20-minute increments. We think in 50 minutes, an hour and a half, hour and 15. So by my estimate, we still have another hour here. In fact, I'm teaching a class at the University of Richmond that lasts for 3.5 hours, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So we can talk, but I promise you, I will not go that long. But I do want to thank Roland and his commitment to these issues, and his commitment to people who are thinking of serving and getting out and serving in the public. And I distinctly remember Roland and I having a lot of great conversations, but he also being very persistent and being there and being part of the campaign in '09 that I ran for the House of Delegates, and being persistent with my campaign manager. And Mike would know this, as when he running. That's what it's all about, is that persistence from organizations. But there's a belief system that I'm going to talk about here, but there's also the persistence, as I think you're seeing here, of being out and continually dialoguing with those folks that are going to be making policies, right? And so you have to have that persistence. So I want to thank Roland for that, because it does take a lot of energy, and if we can give him a round of applause, because it is a lot of effort to do that. But I also want to thank Joyce and Ellen and this great organization, Mothers and Others. And I have three little girls. I have a Katie. Her name's Lydia, and she gave me one of those looks this morning. So I know those looks. I wonder where she's gonna end up. But she has those looks. And this morning I was actually last night I got home late from teaching. We gave them bicycles, and I was telling Robin this. And so my wife, I assembled one of them last night, but I was just too tired. I taught for almost 4 hours. I couldn't assemble another one because we have twins, and so everything you do twice. And so the other one I assembled this morning. She got up and was jumping on my bed, and I assembled it from about 7 to 8:15 this morning. But it's great, having this. And I loved your talk, Joyce. In fact, I was thinking you'd make a great public servant. I loved your talk about the mother's component of this, right? And until you have kids and you know what it is to love someone and to go through that process of loving someone so much, these little bundles of joy, and see them grow up, and just to respect them and that love that is so important, that I think is part of your organization. But then that others component of this, at the Jepson School we talk a lot about what others means, and Mike talked a little bit about this. Others can mean a whole group of different things, but we talk a lot about it in terms of followership, and looking at leadership in terms of the importance of followers, and followers in this other, and respecting what that other is, and understanding what that is, and walking in those other shoes is so very important. So it's a great organization, and I do want to mention a couple things that I think about your. See, I'm pulling out notes too. I promise you I won't read all these, all right? Because Mike said a lot of it already. But a little story here I want to just begin by. So when I ran in '09, and I was obviously, you have to, your values and who you are, and this was always a big issue for me. Karen Rasky just left. This issue, and obviously a woman's right to choose, those issues were always the big issues for me. And when I ran in a district that had a Democratic Performance Index of around 47%. So it wasn't a lean Democratic seat. It was a moderate seat. But it was a seat that, at the time, obviously, in enough energy, I thought, running against John O'Bannon, I could win. But these two issues, and these issues that dealing with rights and humanity is so important to me. The district, the 73rd district, it's no longer the way it looked like. Now I'm in the 68th with redistricting with Manoli's district. But the district, actually, the 73rd, represented by a Republican, actually went for Mark Warner, went for Tim Kaine, went for Barack Obama, and also went against the marriage amendment. And so not only was this an issue that I believe in and the values that I believe in as a person, but also then this district in Richmond, and it's out in the West End, around River Road and into Staples Mill, went against the marriage amendment by a substantial number, 53%. And so we would have these forums, and at one of these forums out at St. Mary's Catholic Church, I was talking, and there's a lot of questions, and being Catholic, I thought this was an audience, that I could talk to about a lot of issues. And so I was talking about that I was against Marshall Newman, and I talked and I said LGBT. And you could hear people going, what is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? And it was a fairly older group. And I said lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. There's actually a video on this on Virginia Wright. And you could see like all these, ooh, gasp, and he's for those issues, and there was a gasp, an audible gasp from the audience. Well, what I want to say, and I think Mike gave a great talk, I think those gasps are becoming quieter, and the optimism that Mike has is where I have too, as well. And you saw, we've been referencing these issues with the poll that came out from the Washington Post. The one number I want to reference here from that, and there's, that you see here that showed 47% should be allowed to marry, LGBT should be allowed to marry, 40% remain opposed. But the one number I want to show here is the one nearly 3/4 of those 18 to 29 support gay marriage. Nearly 3/4, okay? And I think that's an important number, obviously, and with this optimism that's, that we're here, because obviously our Commonwealth in our region is changing. Our Commonwealth in our region is changing, and you see that in so many different areas. In particular, I see it, obviously, with young people that I teach at the University of Richmond. This is not an issue to them. Obviously, this is not an issue to them. It's still, obviously, they discuss it, there's part of it, but it's increasingly not important, it's not this controversial issue to young people, and I think this number says that. And in fact, I think it's become so much so that, I hope that in this optimism, getting young people engaged in campaigns, that we get to start moving out there and start talking about this issue in a way that we can have an honest dialogue. One of the things that I think is so great about your organization is this role of justice. Okay, in fact, standing up for justice whenever it is denied is what you talk about on your website, and I love that. I teach a class called Justice in Civil Society, and this class has Jefferson students go out in the community. And we talk a lot about what it means, and these young people, what it means to have justice and civility in our society. And I think you're right. I think civility is going to be part of our dialogue, and it should be. I use an author, though, here I'm going to throw a name out to you, like Mike did, named Paulo Freire. And he wrote this great book. He's a Latin American. I see Faith shaking her head. He's a Latin American philosopher. And he wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And it's a great book that talks about the oppressed and the oppressors coming together and dialoguing and understanding who they are. But he uses a phrase called humanization and humanizing pedagogy. And what he really is talking about how, and another phrase he used, we are set on co-intentionally creating a new reality together. These are obviously big academic words, but really what he's talking about is how can we humanize each other? Instead of constantly tearing each other down, constantly dehumanizing ourselves, what we talk about in this class, in this justice class, is there's uplifting each other and making sure we're there for each other. And these young people, they really get that. They really understand that. And I think you see that in that number in terms of LGBT issues. I think you see that humanizing potential that is part of folks. And so I want to say, another part of this, and I'll stop there, but is the mission statement that talks about happiness in here. And the quote is, individuals to peacefully pursue their own personal happiness. And Mike talked about how we are as Virginians in our history in Jefferson. And, Jefferson gave so much to this state, but he gave so much to all of us as humans. His Virginia, the Statutes of Religious Freedom, which talks about how we understand. It's just not about church and state and separation. It's about how we understand ourselves. In fact, I was talking last night to this class on Jefferson's bill for the diffusion of knowledge. He actually set forth a bill that would try to create a set of common schools. It was actually voted down 3 times. So he had a lot of bills that were voted down too in the General Assembly, but voted down 3 times in the General Assembly from 1797 to 1816. In the beginning of this bill, in talking about what knowledge means and what education means, is the word happiness. And I think he knew what happiness meant, because what we are as humans is to be happy and fulfill lives. In fact, he takes the word property out of where Locke has it, life, liberty, and property, and substitutes happiness in there. And we talk a lot about that at the University of Richmond, the Jefferson School, because happiness is what we all should be fulfilled. in order to do the things that we all really want to do. And so I love that word that you have in your mission statement, happiness, because that's really what we're all about. I want to conclude by saying, and address your question, Judd, about the role of politics, and without getting too political here. Having run for office once in a hard campaign, in a tough year for Democrats, and then having run a second time very shortly, and as I term a theoretical candidate for redistricting. And it was pretty cool being an academic, Mike, and having a theory campaign, all this great stuff and what you would do, and then it's gone, in redistricting. But I do want to talk about, there's the persistence of people like Roland and mothers and others, and the persistence of addressing these issues to your candidates and to politicians and to public servants. However, and someone mentioned Democrats here, however, I think there is also the role of what we, regardless of where the populace is, regardless of where the electorate, that we have to start standing up for some issues. We have to start believing in who we are and what we want to do and where we want to see this Commonwealth going. Because as this poll from the Washington Post showed, the people are way ahead of us on this issue. They're way ahead of us, right? They're way ahead of the General Assembly. They're way ahead of us in terms of our policies. They know where we want to go and what we want to do, and so let's start believing in that, and let's start taking a stand. I know it's difficult for some politicians to do that because of their backgrounds, their experiences, and who they are and what they've done, where they've been raised. Me being Catholic, that had a big part in a lot of what Catholicism says about this issues and a lot of other issues. However, I think as Democrats, we need to start saying this is what we believe in. And this is who we're going to be, and this is what we want our Commonwealth to look like. And Mike worked with someone who did that wonderfully, Tom Piorello. And he did that so well in the last election cycle in 2010 that, you know what? He actually almost won that race down in the 5th, as compared to another great person in the 2nd. But that, he really stood for these issues. And people believe in that. And when you're making those calls, as you have to do, and make a lot of those calls, you have to understand that you're standing for something. So please continue to hold people accountable, but at the same time, I think we need to start saying to our public servants, listen, these are issues that we believe in, and you should as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. From two academics, I think it's been a great opportunity to talk. This is a great organization. I hope I can continue to be part of it, and Roland, please continue to involve me in this type of stuff. So thank you.